Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey. We're here to recap all the action from round 2 for you all. Before we get to all that and more, need to find out, Winnie, how are you, mate? And how did the best bets go in this round?
Okay, thanks, man. I mean, round 2 was off its head, so this will be a wild show. There's so many games to try and explain. Good luck connecting some of the dots from round 1 performances to round 2. We warned you. I mean, you said it yourself. Some people say a week is 7 days, but it's a long time in the game of rugby league. I mean, 7 days ago, I said there were 3 teams people have already written off. And that was actually before Para played. I think coming out of round 1, there were 4 teams people said have no chance this year. New Zealand, Sydney Roosters. Are we reevaluating those sides? On the other side of the coin, Cowboys written off after round 1, no better. Eels, worse when you consider the opponent. So mixed bag, but some of the upsets, including just about the biggest upset I've ever seen. And unfortunately, we end the round on a sour note for both of us, because your Titans, same old Titans, man, as we said pre-going live, that's really frustrating. Where's the toughness of that team? We can cover that game first or last, you decide. But that cost a best bet because I had unders. Unders was no hope. Terrible tip. Or maybe I underestimated the conditions, but some of those tries, unbelievably soft. And yet the Titans, they've always found a way to screw your unders, though, because they will score some themselves. So got that game totally wrong. What really stings me is the mixed matchup. We had a 3-team combo. We just needed basically less than 60 points in the game, the Sabo, and there was 64. Yeah, so actually lost mixed matchup. We were $1.12 going into the game, which does really sting. So I'm 1-1 with mixed matchups. I'm 2-2 on best bets, and you didn't have much more luck than I did with your Clarkey's Collect either this week.
No, I mean, to touch on Clarkey's Collect, it was Panthers to win by 10, and I gave the Titans and the Raiders 18-point margins because I expected both of those teams to compete well. I mean, but it was over before it even started with the Panthers. They were no chance to cover that line by 10. And I do love the comment there by Spilt Milk Radio, I think it's meant to be, from YouTube. I am Joe from the pub. If you guys remember back to our preview pod, we were actually poking fun at people that take the obvious bets like Panthers 13+, etc. this round.
Yeah, well, let's quickly review. I think we said there were 5 Joe bets. One was definitely going to be they're taking Manly, so Joe lost that one. Joe was on Penrith, he lost that one. Joe was on the Sharks, he did win that. Joe was on the Dogs, he did win that. But Joe was on the Broncos, he lost that. So I think Joe went 2 from 5 on the obvious public-heavy sides there. Well, at least we did better 1-1. We didn't get burned like a lot of punters clearly did this round.
Yeah, this was a tough round for punters, tipsters, if you're making predictions, whatever it might be. It was a very unpredictable round. I reckon let's start with Game 8, the Bulldogs game, just because it's fresh and we are live, so a lot of people will
get the garbage out of the way.
Get the garbage out of the way, as you say. Alrighty, so Bulldogs win this one, 40 points to 24. My prediction coming into this was Titans at the line. I think that line was 8.5 when we previewed it, so falling well short of that regardless of what the line was. And my biggest takeaway from this one was just how dominant the Bulldogs were in the ruck. Their wrestle was on another level, and I'm not saying that as a negative because I know a lot of people bring that up and insinuate there was something illegal going on there. They just dominated the tackles, and they earned the right to lay there for an extra few seconds or wrestle that little bit more compared to the Titans, where it just felt like their forward pack couldn't get over the top of the Bulldogs. Maybe it was the Bulldogs having a more mobile and fit pack. Maybe it was the heat. But I know what it certainly was, and it was certainly some of this silly errors in decision-making from the Titans. When the Titans play like that, they then start to question everything, and they come in with a more cautious approach in attack. And then there's fatigue, so they're less effective in attack, which takes away from what is their best attribute, and that is their offense and their ability to throw the ball around. Looking across the fence to the Doggies, to lose Matt Burton, the main member of their spine, in my opinion. And not only that, but he's their main kicker in general play and for goals. So that's great poise and composure there shown by the Doggies to the rest of the spine to step up there and, step up with their key playmaker from the field. They also executed in important times really well. They dominated the opening set to both halves, and they actually scored in their first set in both halves, which is just extremely soft. If I'm going to compliment the Bulldogs for scoring on their first set in both halves, unfortunately, I do need to also say to my Titans, that is very soft. You take 12 points from that total there, and it's it could be game on. But the Bulldogs, they came out, and I just think for this one, from a Titans perspective, yes, there is still plenty to work on. But I also respect the fact, Winnie, that Bulldogs, I think they're a top 4 side this year. So as a Titans fan, I'm happy to have some positive moments against them in our first hit out of the year. But certainly away from those positives, when we look at the negatives, they're very bad and they're very soft. And I'm sure you saw it in similar fashion.
Yeah, and when you have to wait basically 2 weeks to play and you're going to start like that, it was abhorrent. I mean, this is the scene of the dismal 32-0 defeat last year, fresh in the Titans' memories. And they're out there and it's 22-0 after 20. And it's not just that. It's one of the tries is basically the Dogs just have a penalty and tap and go. And Curran is held by 3 defenders and just outmuscles them and spins and lands on the try line. Like some of the softest tries you'll ever see. There was an equally soft one soon after halftime for Kurt Mann. How can you explain that? You know, I think it's easy to criticize my best bet. I went under 46.5, and I'm thinking night game. Dogs is a gritty type of team. Titans' first game, if they're ever going to be, you know, fresh and ready to start the year on a positive note and playing with some sort of toughness, because you know that Titans team can find points. But if they can actually be gritty, and I thought this could be a gritty style game, you know, totally wrong. It really was the same old Titans. And I think in addition to someone mentioned, like the conditions were pretty tough out there. I underestimated a night game in Sydney still being that sweltering. It's part of it, but not a fair excuse. And maybe just a bit speculative of me to say I think this game will be closer than others will expect. And I think the Titans will, you know, have to defend and complete sets. They certainly couldn't defend. So 22-0, but then Burton does his MCL, as you said. Kickout did it later. And I'm thinking, well, if the Dogs can defend, you still, you know, could get under 46.5. You've seen a lot of games like Dolphins, Knights we'll get to next. There's 26 at halftime. There's only, I think, 1 or 2 tries in the second half, you know. But, of course, the Titans scored 2 quick tries. I'm pretty sure you called it out on Tuesday and said Dogs' right side defense was the vulnerability against Dragons. Go a try for AKP. He gets a double. So it's like the Titans hurt you because then they score too easily. Then first set of the second half summed it up, where the Titans drop a bomb into Presto's lap. He scores. Next try's horrendous. Actually, the funny thing was with the line being 8.5, the cover was in question late. It was 34-24 for quite a few minutes. And the Titans were knocking on the door. And if they score a backdoor try, they will cover. But it's actually the Dogs that get the scoop and score, blow it out, probably get a scoreline more reflective of what they deserved. Very, very ordinary Titans is being kind.
Final point for me on this game, mate. Septile118 from YouTube came in with the exclusive mail on our preview that he's been gaming too much. Matt Burton, that is. And, of course, now we hope Matt Burton has a speedy recovery, but you can see some people making light of the jokes back there on Tuesday in regards to the Marvel game or whatever it was.
He'll be stoked. He'll get a lot more time for gaming now while he's rehabbing the knee.
I've never played the game, but he'll be able to level up Hulk, Thor, and whoever else he wants to. So that's a small positive to come from Burton's injury there. Alrighty, let's go all the way back to Thursday night, mate, and look at game 1 where the Knights defeated the Dolphins, 26 points to 12. Prediction coming into this one, I had Knights at the line. And you know what, when this game finished, and I thought, great start to the round. And that's probably about where all my luck finished for this round in terms of predictions. My biggest takeaway, though, was the Knights' spine. And they didn't play like a traditional spine. I thought Kalen Ponga was the first receiver at times, and Fletcher Sharp was attacking like a fullback. Jack Cogger was playing wider as the halfback. And I think, for me, that kind of explains why their attack was a little bit disjointed in round 1. It makes sense, and I kind of like it, stepping out of the traditional footy systems. But, of course, that does take extra time to nail, and maybe that's why we saw them start so slow in round 1 against the Tigers. On this game in particular, I thought the Dolphins really struggled. They were just out of sorts from the get-go in both offense and defense. I felt for Isaiah Katoa in particular. He had more meters himself, Winnie, than every single one of the Dolphins forwards did individually. And he also made 31 tackles, which I just think is crazy. And you don't want to single out individuals, but where the spine failed to create opportunities, other players, namely Jake Averillo, massively overplayed their hand and further disjointed that attack. So they were completely out of sorts, and I don't have too many positives for the Dolphins from this game. I can only offer to their fans that I think they can still improve. That's 2 weeks in a row with disrupted preparation in terms of needing to travel to Sydney early due to the cyclone. So I think they can only improve from here. I felt for the Knights, they really put together a strong 60-minute effort in this game. In the opening round, they had a good 40 minutes against the Tigers. And so I think an 80-minute performance is building for this Knights side. And I really did like what I saw from them. And I think they'll be way better for this run and continue to improve, mate. How did you see the Knights and Dolphins game last round?
So I've talked about how disappointing your team was this round. Now we get to talk about mine and the fact that neither of our sides have won a game yet this season. That could be a good bet. Whose team will win first? Clarkey's Titans or Winnie's Finns? And I'm looking ahead to next week. Finns pick them against Tigers. Titans pick them against Knights. So, it's a pretty 50-50 bet. But it's not a good start for the Dolphins. I know there's excuses there. And going to Newcastle, it's not an easy place to play. And the way that the Knights play, they don't give you anything easy. Very gritty side. Carried that on from what got them the win over the Tigers, where just hanging tough when it wasn't going Newcastle's way. When it finally swung, there's enough class there. And you know what a threat Kalen Ponga is and Bradman Best. But in addition to that, Sharp, the way that the role he's playing, they may have to change when Brown gets there. But for now, what a handful Sharp is at 6. And then on the left side as well, Lucas is a great player and really emerging, but I think also just reaping the rewards of being on that left side out there with all that strike, as opposed to the Finns clearly missing a couple of key edge forwards, never looked in it. I mean, it was 20-0 inside 30 minutes. So, your boys were down 22-0 today. Never much of a hope. Similar for the Dolphins. And yes, they had disruptions and missed training and had an unexpected trip to Sydney last week. But it's not like they've gone down narrowly twice in a row and you can say, change one play here or one factor and this side could be really happy. It's their Finns were way off the pace, and it now next week looms highly important against the Tigers team that was excellent today.
Yeah, the Tigers were unbelievable, and it will be a tough game for the Dolphins. I'm interested because typically we have the theory on the podcast where you don't want to be on a side coming off one bad loss, but then when there's 2 in a row, you start to look at it. I don't want to skip too far ahead for your predictions next round, but are you willing to almost add a bit of a mitigation in there for the Dolphins because of the disrupted preparations and give them another chance next round?
Yeah, for sure, because last week wasn't that bad of a loss. Like, the Dolphins didn't play that bad. A little better execution. Remember, you just missed more kicks at goal. Otherwise, maybe you do beat Souths. This week, underwhelming, but we have to probably give Newcastle credit. A lot of us came into the year, including me, I suppose. I don't think I found a spot for Newcastle in my 8. I had them under strong consideration, but maybe end up 10th. But maybe we were misjudged Newcastle, and maybe they are a clear top 8 side. So at home, they're going to beat a lot of teams this year. As I say, a lot of players are in great form. The Finns, little disruption, missing some important pieces. And that was the difference really told.
Yeah, I agree. I think based on what I've seen in the opening 2 rounds, I probably have underestimated the Knights. I think I had them in my bottom 5 from memory. But what I like this year is having the 2 fullbacks in the spine with Fletcher Sharp and Kalen Ponga. It reminds me of kind of like the Storm blueprint where Hughes is traditionally a fullback, as is Munster really. But then with Papenej, you get that exciting attack. So great job to the Knights in that game.
And just one more note on the Knights. The clue was there that the Knights forced West to miss like 60 tackles in round 1. But the Knights only scored 10 points. And the reason for that was the Knights butchered a few tries and left points out there against West. Like, you think one time Bradman Best got it. If he ran, he would have scored, but he passed. And then the next time, if he passed, they scored, but he ran. So then Newcastle actually were a little bit sharper this week, and the points flowed, and it was a lead that was totally insurmountable for my Finns.
Not sure if you meant that one, but I agree. The Knights definitely were sharper this round. Game 2, Warriors defeat Manly, 36 points to 16. My prediction coming in this one was Manly 1-12, and I got that one wrong. My biggest takeaway from this one, when Tom Trbojevic doesn't fire, Manly don't fire. Every year I kind of try to push that narrative to the side because it's so overplayed. But the reality is sometimes these calls are overplayed and these predictions are overplayed because they're just obvious. And I think that's still the case for this Manly side. He was playing poorly until he got injured there. I want to look squarely at Manly when I start this breakdown. To perform like they did in round 1 and dead set look like the Invincibles tour the Australian Kangaroos had over in England back in the day, and then not even back it up with a win, but to back it up with a 20-point loss to a side that was coming off like a 22-point loss, all factors aside, that's really poor. That's really poor consistency after what you can only assume would be a big preseason. And so where did it go wrong for them? I thought poor discipline, multiple set restarts conceded. They scored early, and it's almost as if that flicked a switch in their mind that let's clock off. This is going to be another fun night in the office. But the reality is, whether you're facing the Knights or the Tigers, when they're in the midst of their 3 wooden spoons in a row, there's no easy games in the NRL, and you have to earn it every week. This Manly side was not willing to earn it in what I believe is the toughest sport on earth. So poor mindset, poor execution, poor discipline, and of course, poor consistency. Over to the Warriors quickly. I expected they would improve from Vegas. You remember I said in our preview, I don't think their attacking issues are too deep and they can easily be corrected. But the only reason I didn't back them here, whilst I did expect them to improve, was just how dominant Manly were in round 1. It was tough for me to see that Manly side losing. I just couldn't picture it. But the Manly side we got was nothing of the sorts. So I must say I overestimated them and I underestimated the Warriors to a certain extent as well, because they earned a lot of respect with this office. And it was an important night for them too, Winnie, because they honoured Tohu Harris. Final point for this one for me, though, is strap in for another season of unpredictability and difficult tips. And keep in mind, Winnie, I write these breakdowns the moment the game finishes. So I didn't know what else was coming in the next game, which is Roosters and Penrith. So that definitely proved true, mate. How did you see this game, though?
And that trend of New Zealand, when they're a favourite, like they were in the opening game of the season, they were favoured against Canberra, remember? You can't trust them. But when you don't expect them to win, they'll probably be a lot closer to their best. The reason I was on New Zealand for a best bet here, I said that the Cowboys were so bad, they made Manly look a lot better than what Manly really are. I don't think Manly are a contender type side. I know Manly, because they are a bully when the other team is off the pace, Manly looks as good as anyone, but you don't get that every week. And I also said New Zealand was so bad in Vegas that I just knew they couldn't possibly be that bad generally. Like it had to be an outlier. But I was nervous. There's comments there like Ryan saying nervous, worried for the best bet early. Manly scored one that really easily, butchered a few. That's true for sure. Manly scores 3rd minute. And I think with the right game plan, the Warriors have got the stronger forward pack, stronger middles. Manly's thinking, let's use our speed. Let's play around New Zealand. 3rd minute, a shift from inside Manly's half. And it's a try nearly under the post, actually a little to the right of the post. And Garrick misses the conversion. Still 4-0. I'm going, uh-oh. And then Manly opens New Zealand up again and a grubber in. And if Turbo picks it up off his laces or if it bounces for him, it's a try. But he just gets a bad bounce, spills it. I think Manly scored again, but it's a forward pass, right? So, you're hanging in there with New Zealand. And New Zealand plays a predictable style. When New Zealand did get some ball, they didn't instantly turn it on. It was a bit one-dimensional, playing close to the ruck, lots of physical, hard charges, one-off, or when New Zealand does spread it, they turn runners back underneath. But what that does do is it fatigues your middles, and it's just like chipping away at a block. And yes, New Zealand's predictable in the way they're playing, but even if you can predict it, you've still got to be able to stop it. And another reason I played New Zealand first half is I just feel like when the crowd is really, when the crowd's really into it, there is an influence on the referees. And I think New Zealand deserved a lopsided set restart count because Manly was pretty savvy. Manly was hanging on those tackles for dear life. When it got inside the red zone, Manly was up early a lot. I think like the sin bin later, it was justified because Manly was doing anything to try and scrap and claw to stay in the game. But when you get the higher completion rate, when you get something like the first 7 set restarts, that then the predictable way that New Zealand wants to play is just going to ultimately knock down the front door. And that did lead to 3 straight converted tries by the Warriors and could have really been more with the wave of possession later in the first half. So I'm not going to apologize about taking a team plus 4.5 first half and they win 18-6. The funny thing was Manly threatened to get back into this game. There's 2 tries in the space of about 8 minutes. It doesn't matter now because New Zealand won by, 20 points. But neither of them were a try. And I'd love to be the bunker and get paid to look at something 10 times and then not make a decision and just say, oh, that was inconclusive. I don't know. You look at it enough times. The ref gets one shot while moving in real speed from one angle. And yes, the ref thinks that Saab put it down. I don't blame the referee's on-field decision. We see the replay. Saab lost it. But even worse was the try Manly scored off the breakaway and the kick in behind, where Garrick's foot, to me, clearly is scraping the paint, the back of the in goal, to then save it in. And I was absolutely stunned that the ref gave that try, because it allowed Manly to cut the lead to 6 or 8 points. And that could be game-changing. In the end, luckily, it wasn't for New Zealand, and the right side rolled on, and the night went from bad to worse for the Manly, with Turbo exiting. They said hamstring tightness. Hopefully nothing more than that. DCE as well. Do you know what the injury was there, Clarkey? Was it back spasms or just like a knee to the back? We final note for me, where the mixed matchup was in a great position, because I faded Manly's team total in this one, but we got burned at the end of the Dogs-Titans game anyway.
Yeah, quickly on your notes, I agree. I think the Warriors found their DNA in this game and a blueprint on how they can win. I agree the referees are lucky that there isn't more controversy about those 2 tries that were very touch and go. And final point for DC, he did say in the Sydney Morning Herald, I'll be surprised if I'm not playing next week. So he said it was more of a cork in his calf, which caused him to overload his hamstrings, which is a weird explanation. But if anyone's looking at those future lines at this stage, it appears like DCE will be there. Tom Trbojevic is the one we don't know about. Alrighty, game 3, mate. Roosters defeat Penrith 38 points to 32. And my prediction for this one was Penrith will win and win well. I thought giving them just a 10-point margin was super conservative and an easy way to get a leg of our multi up. And my biggest takeaway is WTF happened. On all fronts, this is the most unpredictable result ever. You just couldn't have predicted this coming into the round. Now, consider this. The Roosters had not beat the Panthers in the last 10 games they've played. The last time they beat the Panthers, only 3 players from that side were still in this side today. Then they come into this game after conceding 50. Now, this year, they have lost an experience. Suaalii, Manu, Kiri, JWH, Tupanua, and Terrell May. I know it's a new season, guys, but it's still, they'd only played 80 minutes without them. So it is still fresh to an extent. Then there's no Radley or Collins. They're both ruled out. Then there's no Spencer Laniu. He's suspended. No Butcher Brothers. They're unavailable. And we know Sam Walker and Brandon Smith aren't there also. That's a starting 13 right there. How on earth have they pulled this off? Then we look across at Penrith, and this is where it gets super strange as well. So poor by their standards. Dare I say it, since their dynasty started in 2020, this was their worst game by far. And they still came so close to winning. So that's just crazy to me. Like, it was so poor by Penrith's effort and by Penrith's lofty standards, I should say, and they still almost won. It was a tackle to push Brian Toto over the sideline on the last play of the game. Final point for me, though, Winnie, this is just why rugby league's the best sport. You know, you can forget betting lines, forget odds, forget who's in and out. Anyone can win any given day, and this is the reminder of that. Now, I know if these 2 sides play 20 times, the Penrith Panthers are going to win 19 of those. But in this game, the Sydney Roosters came and they outcompeted the 4-bye reigning champions and got what will become a famous rugby league win as the second biggest head-to-head offering from the bookmakers since 2009. There was only one, the Broncos in 2021, I think, against the Roosters were $11.50. So they were as high as $11 when he said the second biggest head-to-head offering from bookies, and they've won since 2009. So it truly was a special night for the Roosters. How did you see it, though?
That's right. I do remember that Broncos big upset, though. I don't even reckon the line was as big as this one. People who follow the pod actually remember I talk about a bet I made before the pod even existed, 2013, so I'll never forget. And that was your Titans against the Roosters. The Roosters were the 24.5-point favourites, and I backed the Titans head-to-head $13, and they actually got the win. That was the final round of the season, I want to say. Sometimes you do get funny results in the last round with teams looking ahead.
That was 2013, and they were paying $10.77, so ever so slightly less.
Yeah, I saw that stat, and I mean that depends where you look. But I actually backed it at the tab, and I know I got $13. But
nice.
Yeah, depending on who the source is and what the price, for sure. And so that's actually a more explainable one. Like, I actually did pick that result. I did not pick Friday night. So on top of what you said, the thing is, it is early season. So if you're going to say, like, is it the biggest shock you've ever seen? I mean, the Dolphins beating the Roosters a couple of years ago in round one as 18-point under. That was pretty shocking. But early year, teams are at different fitness levels. But the weird thing is we had already seen Penrith play, and Penrith looked so good against a high-quality opponent in Vegas. So you didn't really have the concerns of, Penrith's a bit underdone early in years because you'd seen them have a hit-up. You didn't have the concerns, Penrith's a bit clunky because Luai's not in the halves anymore. Like, it's, a little bit of a reshuffle. The Panthers look slick as anyone against a top four opposition. And you come into this and you add To'o, and Henry was in there as well. So it was insane. But I just thought the Roosters were like, well, we're not going to go toe-to-toe with Penrith. Let's try and play fast and play around the Panthers if we can. And a combination of Roosters playing with a lot of belief, nothing to lose, uncharacteristic errors, but also more so than the errors, the missed tackles that we're just not accustomed to seeing out of this Panthers side. Since saying that, that was the most surprising thing to me at halftime, for example, that the Panthers have given up 18 points. It's 18 all, because Penrith actually scores 2 minutes in under the post. And if you were, if you did play the line, which started at -9.5 and gets all the way out to 24.5 at kickoff, you send back thinking Penrith's going to win this by 40 or 50. And everyone's already starting to count their money of all their same gamers that we've seen come in round one, thinking it's a formality. But actually, it's a tight game. You still would expect Penrith kicks on with it. Of course, 3 tries in a row by the Roosters, including a couple in the space of 2 minutes. I felt like when Sandon Smith scored, there was real belief that the Roosters could get there, though Penrith made them sweat. As you said, that wild finish reminded me of late in the year last year, Parramatta game, where the Eels, where Penrith scored 18 points in the last 7 minutes, something to just break Parra's heart. You thought you were going to get that here. And if Cleary converts, if the Iceman converts that final try, it's a 6-point game. When Penrith gets in the red zone after that, they wouldn't have had to take the 2, because I know it's a final margin of 6, but what happened was Cleary needed to make a conversion to cut it to 6. Then Penrith would have been within a try. He didn't. So when Penrith got the late penalty, they cut it from 8 to 6. So Penrith still got down there again, as you said. It came down to the final play. And, I mean, you've got to give a lot of credit to several Roosters, but just Teddy outplaying Edwards, the man who's surpassed him for New South Wales. Vintage Teddy, 3 try assists in this one. They don't win it without him. And Ivan said afterwards his team just wasn't locked in. And I'm paraphrasing, but, you do wonder if it's human nature. Like, Penrith are well aware. If we're not at our best, we will lose to Cronulla, because you've got a lot of respect for how good Cronulla is. They're a legit threat. And then a week later, you look at the Roosters lineup and who's not there, and you just sort of exhale, even if it's subconscious. Nobody in the locker room saying, boys, we're going to win this easy, but I think there is a human nature element there. So give us a little bit of credit, as Ryan thanked us in the comments. We both said 24.5 was the point where we would bet the Roosters. But at the time, the line was only 20.5 when we did the preview. Mind you, hindsight, we should have taken that. It would have been more than enough.
Yeah, I think one of the underrated parts of Teddy's game is his leadership, and that was definitely on display with such a young Roosters side here. But yeah, just a shocking result that I'd be really interested in how many people actually did take the Roosters outright. And, like you said, we weren't even comfortable sitting on them with a 20-point lead when we did our preview show. So just brilliant by the Roosters there, and all respect to their players that stepped up. Alrighty, game 4, mate. Rabbitohs defeat the Dragons, 25 points to 24. My prediction coming to this one was either side 1 to 12, but I did think that would go the way of the Dragons. And my biggest takeaway was kick pressure from the Dragons, non-existent again. This was such a big factor last week against Matt Burton's Bombs, where they didn't pressure him all game. And let me just add to that and say, when the game is on the line and Jamie Humphries is getting a dodgy offload and no one's thinking to pressure the kick here, I'm sure at that point they weren't thinking field goal, but you certainly want to pressure his kick so it's not effective, not a repeat set, etc. And there's one player chasing, Jacob Liddell, who was fresh on the field at the bench from that stage. That is so poor in round 2. That is so poor. Look, I predicted a close game here. We did get that, but I was still disappointed in the Dragons' performance. The Rabbitohs lost 2 middle forwards in this game, Towers Duncan and Jai Arrow. So that levels the playing field as to where I feel the Dragons' weakness is currently, and that's their forward pack. So they had every opportunity here. But when you talk about desire, heart, pushing when you're tired, wanting to compete on every play, they simply fell short on that. Whereas for the Rabbitohs, when we look back to the Dolphins game, That's exactly what they did, and that's exactly how they won, in my opinion. If you guys remember, I said I thought the Dolphins got a lot more things right than the Rabbitohs in that game. Wayne Bennett, he just knows how to get aside, fighting and competing, keeping it simple. And what was most impressive to me was how they stuck to their game plan for the entire game. Even when it seemed like they might have to adjust, they backed their coach, they backed the coach's message, and they just come over the top ever so slightly and get that win. Whereas for the Dragons halves and Lachlan Ilias and Kyle Flanagan, they panicked. When it got close, when the pressure was on, they panicked and they didn't come up with the right plays. Final point for me, it's a bye now for the Dragons, I believe, in round 3. And so coming out of this bye winning, I actually think next round for them can be really make or break on the mentality of their season. And they do need to correct a lot of things. So the bye is coming at the right time, but the bye also piles more pressure on this club, in my opinion, because they simply have to get the win coming out of it, just based on what they've shown in the first 2 rounds for mine, mate. What did you think about this game when you look back on it?
It is classic Wayne Bennett that his team was probably not the better team 2 weeks in a row, but they didn't beat themselves, and so they find themselves 2-0. The Dragons butchered this game, I've got to say. You should never lose a game where you score 4 tries in a row. And from a 12-4 Bunnies lead, the Dragons did score the next 4 straight tries, leading 24-12 with 20 to go. Kick to come. That kick to come that would have made it a 14-point margin was missed by Holmes, one of his 3 misses on the night. So that means the Dragons lost a game where they scored more tries. Ironic that Holmes was the best kicker in the comp last year and crucial misses. And I said the same about Izako, who was a reliable kicker in the past, missing against Souths. Don't know what, there's no strategy in that as a team on the receiving end of goal kicking, but it's worked out very well for the Bunnies a couple of weeks in a row in ultra narrow margins. And the Dragons just didn't put Souths to bed. When you look at the millions in salary cap sideline for the Bunnies and the sustained injuries during the game as well. But the Dragons made errors that invited Souths in, and Souths cut it to within 6. And if you're within a try, anything can happen. And then next thing it's level with 10 to go. And I'm starting to think, hey, I don't really trust Flanagan and Ilias to come up with a match-winning play here. Whereas the Bunnies are thinking, we've actually got a shot at the death there. We've got Cody Walker. We've got, we believe in that. But you're right. The way that you explain the winning play of this game is the most nonchalant field goal you'll ever see. Like the Bunnies get down the Dragons' end, but still like 20 or 30 away and out wide. Throw it to Cody Walker. He doesn't really know what to do. You can see he's thinking about what he's going to do before he catches it. So the ball slips through Walker's hands, goes to ground. A prop picks it up and pops it to Humphreys. And then Humphreys just is standing close to the middle of the field. I'm thinking, well, 5 minutes to go. The game's tied. I've got the ball. It's 5th tackle and nobody's coming towards me. Well, why don't I just have a shot at the field goal? And he slots it. And I just thought, I know Souths will win this by 1 point now. And whereas the Dragons actually had sets where they rolled up the field, 10 offloads, had Souths at 6s and 7s, but when it came to the final play, couldn't even get a shot. So that's where your halves are costly. And final point, look, of course you missed Latrell, and I talked about the marquee men on the sideline there. Jai Gray is no Latrell Mitchell, but he had 29 runs in this game, close to 300 meters. The motor on that guy is insane. And that's the thing. You keep fighting, you're going to give yourself a chance. And Souths got it by the narrowest of margin.
Yeah, well, as you say there, if you keep fighting, you give yourself a chance. I believe Wayne Bennett in his book had a quote where something like, you make your own luck in rugby league. And what he meant by that was, as long as you're giving yourselves an opportunity, you're around the footy, you're trying and you're pushing hard, good things will come. That's how you get lucky in rugby league, he basically said in his book. And I mean, yeah, it was so true in this game. So great call out there. Let's move on to game 5, where the Sharkies defeat the Cowboys 36 points to 12. And my prediction coming in was I leaned to the Sharks, but I can't claim anything there because I did say I'll stay off, as there was a 35% chance it would rain. And I think that was a bit of a factor to make me stay off the Sharkies. Biggest takeaway I had when he was that this Cowboys side does not know their identity, and I had hear me out to go on with that. But then I watched the press conference 24 hours later, the next morning, and Todd Payton literally starts his press conference by saying this side doesn't know their identity. So I was certainly right in how I was seeing that. I just think in prior years, there was so much electricity through their 17 that they could afford to slack off in defense, and they'd still overcome sides through their sheer offense. And then against the lower sides, their offense would just be too much, and it wouldn't matter about defense at all. Now they can't attack at that same level. Reece Robson isn't getting out from dummy half. Their forward pack aren't getting over the line. They've lost strike and cohesion throughout their back line. And as a result of the previous years, they never had to learn how to defend at a really high level because they never really needed to. They were still winning games. So we get a team that has no balance to their play style. They aren't particularly effective in attack. And defensively, as I said, they're very poor there as well. Now, their starting front row combination at the moment is Jordan McLean, who is an aging forward, and Sam McIntyre. Now, forgive my pun here, but that is the Mick worst duo in the competition. And I'll eat a hat if I'm wrong there because they just got dominated by AFB and Oregon Carfusi. They got huge issues on both sides of the ball. They look the least threatening of any side I've seen so far this year. And when I look at the Sharks, they were good, but they weren't great. Like, they're a side we expect to play finals. They did enough to beat this Cowboys side. They weren't that impressive. But, I mean, what else can you say? They didn't need to be good. That's how poor the Cowboys are at the moment. The Sharks got a 24-point win quite comfortably, and I don't think they looked all that good. They looked better in Vegas when losing to the Panthers, I'll say. Final point for me, I do want to finish with giving the Sharks credit because I did kind of downplay it there. Look, it was great work for them to rebound from their Vegas loss. As we saw with the Panthers before this, 2 games before this, it can be tough coming back from Vegas. They then traveled to Townsville as well, so more travel. But they stayed focused and they got the result. So great job there for the Sharkies, mate. How do you see this one when you look back on it?
Cowboys. Oh, I feel like I don't need to talk as long for this game because the scoreline pretty much is what happened. You talk about the lacking in the Cows forward pack. They need a $1 million forward. It's like, speaking of, since big contracts are so topical, if only there was a middle forward that they, was on $1 million a season that could help this team. They got that guy. They don't even play him in first grade, but that's partly because of the very much diminishing returns on the Taumalolo deal. And that goes back to our conversation earlier this week about how those contracts don't age well, especially for forwards. But then you got another forward who admittedly plays on an edge in Nanai, who played for Australia, in the World Cup and can't get a game because he's not good enough defensively. But you come out at home in a big spot. I didn't expect the Cows to win, and I didn't back the Cows with the line or anything, but I wanted to see them be competitive, show some heart, show some fight after being so awful at 4 Pines a week ago. Just show some spirit. So to come out and just be blown away again shows that North Queensland have major issues, as opposed to the Sharks that are just a fierce side that will make you pay for your mistakes. I like the role that Hines plays. People say he went missing a little bit in Vegas, just ran it more last night. And the thing about Cronulla, why I like them too, they're not all household names. In the back line, for example, everyone knows Mulatalo, but Stone Street is the backup winger, filling in admirably for Katoa there. And what about Iro? 12 tackle busts yesterday. The Cowboys have just no toughness, which was established in, I think it was Peyton's second season. That was the identity of this Cows side. And remember how they were just money covering the line every second half because they were fitter and tougher than everybody. That's just gone out the window. And you know who the Cowboys play next? It's a side that's reeling, that's going to be desperate for a win, the side that we can talk about next because it's the original Queensland derby. Cowboys, and I think Cowboys have to come down to Suncorp from memory. So it doesn't get much easier considering the mood Brisbane will be after copping some capital punishment if you want to move to the Raiders game.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, mate. I don't want to look ahead too far, but I think at this stage it's really hard to tip the Cowboys in that one unless we get something freakish come out on Teamless Tuesday. But let's move to that game, mate. Raiders defeat Broncos 32 points to 22. It was a massive game. I tell you what, man, I got there at 7:15, let's call it. Not a park left in the place. Everyone had started pulling off to the side illegally. And I was like, I don't want to get fined. So I actually had good tickets, but I had to just literally drive home and miss the game, which sucks. There was a big crowd there at Raiders home ground, and they turned up for their fans. My prediction coming into this one was Raiders at the line. I thought Broncos would win, but I did say there's a small chance Raiders pull an upset. So I preferred them at the line as opposed to Broncos 1-12. And biggest takeaway for me is, do the Broncos have an ego problem? I'm not saying they do, but I simply put that question out there, and I think that you can reasonably ask that and make reasons as to why you think they do. I'm not certain it's an ego problem. This could end up being an outlier, and they could certainly recover very well, and I think they will. But in reality, last round, we were looking at this Broncos side and saying they're going to go 5-0 this year. All the podcasts and major news stations were saying, oh, they're top 4 bound. And they come up against a Raiders side who are missing their best player in Joseph Tarpany. Let's not mistake it. He is by far and away the Raiders' very best player. But you could see his absence really caused every other forward to step up. And that was something we kind of hinted could happen in the preview. On paper, their forward pack does not compete with the Broncos at all. Payne Haas, Patrick Carrigan were arguably the 2 best props last round. But this Raiders side came in with a different energy and focus. 64% completion rate for the Broncos. I thought they were really poor there. 50 missed tackles. Another stat that doesn't read pretty. But in reality, they were just beaten in most energy aspects. The Raiders were just competing a little bit harder. They just wanted it a little bit more, it seemed. And whilst the Broncos had a few, shining bright spots, it would quickly get, dampened out by the Raiders' spirit. And they just wanted it a little bit more, I thought. So my final point for me is I did expect the Broncos to come down slightly, but not to this extent. I did not expect them to fall off this hard. I thought the Raiders are really, really good in this game and deserve all the credit they get, mate. How did you see it?
So you mentioned backing up from Vegas because we just talked Sharks, what we saw out of Penrith. Last year, the 4 Vegas sides swapped opponents. So you couldn't tell whether it was a disadvantage or an advantage playing in Vegas. The reason I say it could be an advantage is because you actually get 2 weeks leading into round 2, essentially. And this time around, let's just assess that. The 4 sides played teams that all played in Australia in round 1 a week earlier. And while Penrith did have a shocking loss, the other 3, New Zealand, big impressive win, Cronulla and Canberra, 3 big impressive wins for those other sides that came back from Vegas. So no disadvantage there. And Tapine, what I will say in response to your point, I'll say, no, Tapine's not far and away the Raiders' best player. I think the strength of the Raiders is they don't really have any superstar. They sort of hunt as a pack. But he's extremely important, sets the tone for the forward pack. And if there was ever a game where the Raiders needed Tapine, it's got to be against Brisbane and against Haas and Carrigan, right? So I was shocked. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but you also know like Savage didn't play either. It was their best outside back in game 1. So I was pretty shocked by this result. I wonder again about that human nature aspect. Did the Brisbane think it would come too easily? I don't think Brisbane would have underestimated Canberra, but just because everything clicked so well, Brisbane in game 1 against Roosters putting on 50, Brisbane just thought that was going to happen again, whereas Ricky really invoked a trench warfare mentality to his team, told them all they'd been written off and no one gave any chance against Brisbane. And another point about the Raiders, how about the fact they just keep unearthing useful Pommy footballers? The latest Nicholson, who gets a start, 2 tries in his NRL debut. Hosking moved to the middle and was excellent, actually helping to handle Brisbane's big boys. It was still in the balanced second half, but the Raiders, because I think it was 16-10 half time, something like that. And but the Raiders come out with more energy second half. So Madge got a chance to try and send a rocket up Brisbane, didn't work. It was 32-10 at one stage. A stunning turnaround for Brisbane. As we said, they look so good, and people are proclaiming that this team's grand final bound. Madge has instantly turned it around. I did say that looks like the fittest team in the comp to me, but they were off the pace second half. So it was a real shocker to me in a round where, if anyone got 8 out of 8, send me proof and you can take my spot on the pod on the spot, basically. The good news for Brisbane, which we touched on before, you got North Queensland next week. I don't know if there's anyone else in the comp, apart from maybe Para, you'd rather face for a get-right game.
Yeah, no, that's literally what I've got for my next note. So let's move to that game. Game 7, Tigers defeat the Eels 32 points to 6. Prediction going into that one when he was Tigers at the line, I felt that they could cover that 3.5 line and show some improvement. But my biggest takeaway is that this Eels side, along with the Cowboys, but let's focus here on the Eels, they have shown me absolutely nothing in these opening 2 rounds. Absolutely nothing. Now, I don't think Mitchell Moses suddenly comes in and fixes this. And if the players and coaching staff are kind of waiting for that, I think they're highly mistaken. Let's be real. He's sidelined with a foot injury that keeps flaring up. So he can't run to get match fitness, let alone any sort of fitness at the moment. He's just resting. All that hard work from the preseason is slowly getting wasted for Mitchell Moses, you could say. Now, let's not forget, these 2 sides played in a spoon bowl last year. And the Eels still won that by a sizable margin. And if I remember correctly, Mitchell Moses was out for that game and Dylan Brown got injured during that game. So when you look across the fence of the Tigers, so much improvement. I did expect them to improve, but I didn't expect this because I didn't know the Eels had regressed so far as a football club. I do think that, no professional sporting club will throw out the excuse of, versing the Storm in Melbourne in round one, given their record. That no one does a preseason and expects to lose under any circumstances. But us as the fans, we can kind of forgive that. The way the Storm played, they probably would have beaten everyone on that day, to be honest. So I was willing to excuse that a little bit for the Eels and give them another chance here, see how they go. But they didn't show any positive signs at all. It's really hard to find any positives from their first two games, despite Jason Riles saying so against their loss to the Storm when they won the second half there. But now we know he was just playing wrong. There is no improvement in this Eels side. They have regressed. They had a chance to kind of galvanise after last round and, look and go, look, we failed miserably in round one. Everyone's writing us off. Let's turn up and show up for our fans here in our first home game, boys. Let's do it. And instead, they didn't show a millimetre of improvement. I know I'm being critical, but I just haven't seen a professional side, show zero signs of improvement from round 1 to 2 when they went from versing the expected premiers in the Storm to the 3-bye reigning wooden spooners. Meanwhile, for the Tigers, let me quickly talk on them. Really great stuff. They struggled with points last season, but the inclusion of Coruscant and Buller back into this spine really boosted that element of their game. Their attack was really awesome, but especially in that second half once fatigue set in. And final point for me, Winnie, it's nice to see the Tigers compete for the full 80 minutes. We saw in round 1, they competed for 40 against the Knights quite well, but they never have competed really for the full 80 minutes in multiple years now. They've had sin bins in a lot of games and stuff like that. Let's not forget, the Eels only scored their try once they were playing with 12 because Buller left the field and they didn't have an interchange. So to play for the full 80 minutes and defend and realistically keep the side to 0 in the Eels when it's 13 on 13, absolutely brilliant by the Tigers. They've shown more improvement than I expected in this game, and I really can't give them a big enough rap. How'd you see this one, though, man?
When you talked about match fitness for Moses, it reminded me of a point, actually. I've already talked Dogs Titans, but I wanted to say probably something else I overlooked as I critique a bad tip. Though I didn't take the Titans, I took unders. But I really think it's a big disadvantage. It was a big disadvantage for the Titans getting the round 1 bye, because usually a bye is an advantage. It's a chance to freshen up, give you extra prep. There's no such thing as that in round 1. You have obviously all the time in the world to be prepared, and you don't need the break. So if anything, the team that doesn't play in round 1 hasn't had the hit out, hasn't built some of the extra match fitness and gotten a chance to really sharpen up and start to hit your straps. And that was probably part of the reason the Titans found themselves down 22-0 today. And then once the game gets out of hand, it's very hard to get under. Moving back to the Eels, you're so right about forgive run, if there ever was, is Melbourne in round 1. And Riles said as much. Well, that's why they're favourites to win the premiership this year. Yeah, you were down 46-6 at half time, but a week later you're down 32-0 to the team that ran last 3 years in a row, as you said. So what's the excuse now? Because I actually didn't listen to Riles' press conference yet. I'll tell you this, though. First 20, 30 minutes, that was such a painful watch. I thought the Tigers were just as bad as Para. Maybe it's a different game if Para can hold the ball. There's something like 8 errors in the first 25 minutes. And Eels let the Tigers off the hook a couple of times. And at 10-0, I still felt like the game could go either way. But I talked about what a big difference Jareem Buller would make for this Tigers side. And I felt like his line break with a lazy, disconnected kick chase for Para that led to a beautiful team try. And it was Galvin finishing it. And he had a couple today. I thought that was the killer blow. That was 16-0 just before half time. And that was basically a lead that Para couldn't get close to. As for West, remember West weren't that bad against Newcastle. Had they just been able to have a bit more of a killer instinct when they led, and this time, second half, we saw it. There was that killer instinct, and I think more confidence with Buller back, of course, Coruscant as well. And it was out of the blue when we talked about players you'd want to sign for the next 10 years. You threw a name out there, Terrell May, and I sort of laughed at that just because I don't feel like he's on that level yet, but he was the best forward on the park in the game today, absolute beast. And Parramatta got totally bludgeoned by him and the rest of West.
10-year deal. That's one strong performance. I just need 269 more, and I'll be proven correct on that point. So I'm off to a flying start. What can I say? That'll do us, mate. For those that are joining us late, we did preview the Bulldogs-Titans game first, so we've gone through that one. But that will do our show for today, guys. So don't forget, we'll be back Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. with a round 3 preview, giving out our best bets and hopefully getting Clarkey's collect back on track as well. That's all from me. Thank you very much for being with us, and over to you, Winnie, for the final word.
So sorry, Chris, we're going to make you wait till Tuesday. He wants to know early predictions for the line in the Panthers Storm. I don't even know if I predict what I think the line should be. I could be tipping my hand, but Melbourne's at home, aren't they? And obviously Melbourne off the bye this week. Penrith looking a little bit out of sorts. I'm expecting, Melbourne's going to be close to a converted try favourite, maybe just under. But we will preview that on Tuesday. What a game. We got to kick off round 3, that's for sure. And the fact that some of these games blew my mind, the fact that you can't just draw straight form lines among teams and the form is almost like rock, paper, scissors. That's what often happens in round 3. That's why we love it as well, that you do get surprises. I don't want to watch something where everything plays out the way I expect it. So that round really probably humbled some people, some punters and tipsters alike, but we'll lick our wounds, dust off. I'm never happy to go 1-1 and lose a mixed matchup from the position we're in. So I've got to bounce back as well for round 3. But that was good fun chatting to you about the madness of round 2. You're not going to get many rounds like that with double-digit favourites losing left, right, and centre. Let's see how it plays out next week. We'll preview it all on Tuesday. We hope you guys will be there with us then. Thanks, guys. Lego.